The loader is one of the most useful pieces of equipment in highway maintenance work. It has literally dozens of uses: stockpiling materials, loading trucks, removing snow, installing culverts, and so on. This program is designed to give you a start on learning how to operate loaders. I'll say that again. It'll give you a start. To get a really good feel for how to run the equipment, you'll need some experience in the operator's seat. You'll get a chance to practice later on. There are 3 audiovisual programs in this series. This first one covers daily checks, how to keep the loader in top running condition. The second and third deal with operation, from startup, shutdown, and basic maneuvering to stockpiling and loading trucks. Daily checks include the inspections and servicing you should do before and during startup, while operating the loader during the day and at shutdown. They're part of the overall preventive maintenance that loaders need to keep running and working. There are 7 basic categories of daily checks: the walk-around inspection, engine and transmission checks, greasing the parts that get the most use, the cab inspection, checks after startup, running checks, what to check for during operation, and finally, checks at shutdown. One thing I should mention is that we've put together a checklist that covers the inspection points for each piece of equipment. Refer to the checklist until you're familiar with the routine. Of course, you should also be familiar with the operator's manual for your unit. I'll start with the walk-around inspection. What you're looking for here are obvious problems: leaks, loose parts, damage, buildups of dirt, trash, and so on. Anything that might affect your safety or the operation of the machine. Look underneath for leaks of oil or water. If you find a puddle or a stain, investigate. Get the problem corrected before you go on. Check the tires. If you think you've got low pressure, use a gauge to find out. And of course, add air as necessary. Low pressure causes steering trouble, wears tires out fast, and could cause accidents. Check the pressure of tires containing ballast only when the stem is up, or else you're liable to get a face full of calcium chloride. Keep an eye out for deep cuts and excessive tread wear. Again, if the tires have ballast, note any wet spots on the surfaces, possibly a sign of leakage due to puncture. Tire trouble's about the last thing you need when you're out on the road. And check for loose or broken wheel lugs while you're at it. Check the hydraulic oil level. You should be able to see it in the sight glass on the hydraulic oil tank. Make sure the bucket is resting flat on the ground when you make this check. If the bucket's raised, the oil will be out in the lines, not in the sight glass. If oil is needed, operate the hydraulic controls to relieve any pressure in the system before you open the oil tank. Then add the right type of oil. If you had to add oil, check the valves and cylinders. There may be a leak. Incidentally, leaks can be hazardous when the system's operating. There's a lot of pressure in there. Look over the whole machine. If you see something that's loose or broken, either tighten or replace it. Of course, if there's a really major problem, you'll have to call your supervisor. Check for broken or burned out lamps. Never go out on the road without thinking first about your safety. Now down to the bucket. The blade or teeth take a lot of wear and tear. If they're broken or worn out, replace them, because if they aren't in good shape, you'll damage the bucket. That covers the walk-around inspection. It's very general. You're looking for obvious problems. Now the engine and transmission. For the engine to run, it needs oil, air, and coolant. Those are your main checkpoints. You never know when an engine's going to start using oil. Check it every day. Add the right type of oil as necessary to keep the level between the full and add marks. Engines use a lot of air, especially diesels, and highway equipment has to work in a lot of dust. That makes air filters absolutely critical. This loader has an air filter restriction indicator. When it turns red, it's time to change the air filter. Okay, coolant. Check the radiator. If the coolant level isn't midway between the radiator core and filler neck, add clean coolant. And then look for leaks. It could be just a bad hose or a loose clamp. But if you don't fix it, you're bound to break down sooner or later. Take a look at the outside of the radiator core. If it's clogged up, either blow it out with an air hose at not greater than 30 psi, or flush it out with water. And check the fan belts. They have to be tight, and they have to be in good condition. Replace them if they're cracked. Tighten them if they're loose. Okay, that covers the engine. Now, the transmission. The dipstick's behind the seat of this model. Check the oil level daily. There are 2 checks. Before starting the engine, and again after the engine is warmed up to the normal operating temperature. All right, on to greasing. There's a greasing chart for your loader in the operator's manual or right on the loader itself. It tells you what parts must be greased and when. Generally, you need to grease the parts that get the most wear every day. On loaders, that means the boom and bucket fittings. That's where most of the action is. Give each fitting a few shots until fresh grease comes out around the seal. Next, the drive shaft bearings and the frame steering fittings. But a warning, never get in there while the engine's running. If someone turned the steering wheel, you could be crushed. So before servicing the pivot area, use the safety bar to lock the loader's front end in place. In fact, anytime you do anything in the pivot area, first be sure the safety bar's in place. Also use the safety bar when transporting the loader. One point about grease fittings. If they're dirty, clean them before greasing. Otherwise, you'll force dirt into the joint, and that's as bad as not greasing at all. When you're done with the grease gun, you're ready for the cab inspection. This inspection's for you. You have to live with this machine all day. Make sure you're going to be comfortable and safe. Check the seat and armrests and adjust them to fit your body. A bad cushion or improper adjustment can make life miserable in just a few minutes. Check the floorboards to make sure you won't slip in grease or oil when you get in or out of the cab. Make sure you can see clearly through the windshield, side glass, and back glass. And adjust your mirrors too. Check the windshield wiper. A streaky windshield is both aggravating and dangerous. Okay, you're almost ready to go. Just a few things left. First, you have to start the engine and let it idle for a few minutes to give the oil a chance to warm up. And finally, operate the bucket and check the brakes before you head out. If there's a problem, now's the time to find it. And that's it for the checks you should make each morning on the loader. Normally, they shouldn't take you more than 10 minutes, and those 10 minutes can save hours by avoiding breakdowns. But there's a few more things you should check later in the day, as you operate the loader and when you shut it down. I'll cover them in part 2, where I'll get into startup, basic maneuvering, and shutdown.